So once you have that in place, the next step, I guess, is diving a little bit deeper in your plan onto the research component. Um, so for this one, there's a variety of different, I guess, avenues or ways to do it. I'll maybe start at actually the bottom bullet and work my way up, just as wasn't able to attend the entire morning, entire session today, but caught a bit of the past one, talking a bit about surveys and data of that can be an incredibly powerful tool when you're talking to government or decision makers, is bringing some data, bringing some public polling. It's not something that our firm does, but it's something that others do. And you can find these providers in Manitoba who do public polling and opinion data. And this can be very, very powerful. If you can come to the decision maker and say, hey, for example, we'll say on issue X of wanting a new industrial park in this area of the community, we have the support of 70% of residents, 80% of business owners, etc. And you can really add some more concrete data to your message by bringing some of that public opinion polling data. And this, it doesn't have to be complex. It could be done through, SurveyMonkey, depending on the scale you're doing. But it can also be done in partnership with, some of the professional organizations out there who do this and their day-to-day. And depending on, the size and scale of the issue, that's something you may want to look at and approach, is that research and polling data can go a long way. And then just moving up, as I said, I'm going to start from the bottom and go up with this one. The research side of, and again, it maybe dovetails back to the start of the goals of, keep in mind, again, that be aware of what government's up to and what they're focused on and thinking of that. If they put out a release or a message of they're going one way on a policy and you want to talk to them about the completely other way, there's maybe a better time to come back. Or if you're looking to push in one area and government's been quite vocal that they're not going to touch that area, again, you maybe want to reconsider what you're looking at or aligning at of to put your efforts and focuses on where you can best make an impact. So keeping in mind a little bit of, again, what the other side's doing, and the government news release angle of, I wouldn't just restrict that again to your jurisdiction of, it blends to the second bullet. What are other jurisdictions doing? I think forums like this and events and conferences are great to bring that kind of joint knowledge sharing and base across with different organizations. But sign up for, Government of Saskatchewan, Government Alberta, and you'll be fascinated to see that, there's stuff going on in other jurisdictions, and then bring that to the table too, of when you're talking to government of, hey, this is an example, this is another way of doing things. And not only other jurisdictions, but often in regards to government programs, if there's, say, a grant program focused in one area, let's say environmental retrofits, that can maybe be adapted, that similar kind of program or format, into another area. Say, I think the next panel is on trails. So maybe that grant program and a lot of those things, and besides what the eligibility is, can just be adapted. So keep that in mind too, of when you're researching and developing your plan. What is government saying? What have they done in maybe similar areas? And that, I think, makes it just easier for everyone. If you can hold up as kind of an example of what we're looking for isn't that different. You already have a program, for example, on the green retrofit side that provides, let's just pick a number, say $5,000. All we're looking for is $5,000 on the trail side, similar administration, things like that. So on the research end, I think that goes a long ways and shows that you're prepared and bring value. And just to wrap off then of the top bullet there of, don't discount, I think, any of that experience, knowledge that you bring from on the ground and being a boots on the ground stakeholder to government. Of at the end of the day, all elected officials are elected by their constituents, people at the end of the day. And so you do bring value in that aspect of just being a community member, being a community leader. And so don't discount that at all. If that is something that policymakers, officials want to hear. So don't discount the strength of your voice or your positions or expertise or insights at all. But if you can add to it with some examples of what other jurisdictions are doing, and add to it as much as you can with kind of other data points to pull it all together when you're planning. Additional point here, which has maybe been kind of drawn out, of the importance of flexibility when it comes to planning. Again, here, having a range of options or different suggestions is very important. As you can understand, governments have a lot of competing pressures, and maybe no best exemplified during this past year, during the pandemic, where there's pressures on PPE, there's pressures on vaccine, and where there's always unlimited demands on government. Most of their day is spent dealing with people asking for something. Maybe it's more funding for this, a change here, a change that. So there's a lot of competing pressures on governments at all levels. And that being said, I think bleeds into that requirement to be flexible, of don't get too married to one idea or ultimatums of that it has to be this or it has to be that. If you can, come up with a range of options. I don't say the hot, medium, cold, but it doesn't have to be 30, but if you come in with kind of a black and white decision, this is what we're looking for, you're not painting much room for government then to have flexibility. And just as similarly as where you probably don't want to be approached with kind of an ultimatum either or approach, keep that in mind when you're approaching and talking to government and decision makers, of have a few options there, ranges, ways this could play out. The window of opportunity bullet, I think I'll speak a little bit on, of then putting this into action later on in the presentation, but the flexibility speaks to that a little bit, of the past year, the pandemic, of if you're speaking to government, and even as we go forward, and touch wood, the vaccine news has been all very positive recently and getting to the vaccination stage, keep in mind of what you're advocating on. To be talking on COVID related stuff, this is a great time. As we're getting into the vaccination side, the page starts to turn a bit. What does the new normal look like? Jobs of the future, e-commerce again, all these kind of big themes. So keep that in mind of when you're speaking to government, what's on their table, what's on their plate. And so be flexible. Don't be married to this is the idea, this is the only way. So really keep that in mind when you're planning. And I encourage, as you're finalizing your plans, to build that flexibility in, and so that there's a range of options and you're not sort of painting anyone into a corner and either or decisions. There's a few different ways it can play out. So just to recap, the four kind of keys, I'd say, are good things to keep in mind. Like any sort of plan, start with the goals. What do you want to achieve with this? It could be a regulatory change. It could be more funding for X. And it could just be as simple as create more jobs or create X jobs. So all goals are good goals, I think, when it comes to advocacy. And I just would reinforce that it doesn't have to be a grandiose, big, massive one. If your goal is just for the next year to build a stronger relationship with your local MLA or local MP, that's great. That's more than enough as a good goal and as a good starting point to build a relationship. Partnerships, stakeholders, I'll use those two interchangeably, but as you're planning, look around, who are others in your community who can help with this, who are others in the region. And again, almost a carte blanche statement of the more voices, the more people you have advocating on an issue or on your side or team, the more powerful your message and voice is. So when you're doing your planning, start looking around, find those other champions to your cause. With the planning, you got your goals, you got your partners, and then a bit more into the research end then of the public community, polling, what's community members saying, and what are other jurisdictions doing? What examples can you draw of you've taken action in this area of government perhaps? What we're asking for is similar in a lot of aspects, just a little bit different, and it helps draw those analogies and make things easier. So the research component is very important in planning. And lastly, don't be, I guess, married or 110% sold on one avenue, one option. Have some flexibility in there and different ways of approaching things when you do approach government. So that gives them a range of options, as almost all their time is spent dealing with people asking for things and demands, and they have unlimited demands on them, and those change quickly overnight. As it's still, to me, amazing to look back of a year ago the WHO calling it a pandemic, and a year ago today, this time actually, I was at the provincial legislature for the budget lockup. Probably the last kind of time I'd been in a, well, since then, that's the last time I've been in a room with more than probably a dozen individuals, really. And the talk and the whisper then of, we hadn't had any confirmed cases yet in Manitoba. The first presumptive case was the next day. And I remember people saying of even the premier might cancel all his public events for sort of the next couple of months. And people were going like, cancel his public events. And then like, really? And we hadn't had any cases yet. And of course, as we've all been surprised over the past month, with just how much the world's changed, and we're doing everything online nowadays. So keep flexible, circumstances change, with government and with organizations as well. So moving to action then, just as I said on the partnership side, the kind of flip side of that, of when you're building partners to then go advocate to government, when you're talking to government, I'd encourage you to cast a wide net. Typically, these are large organizations, and a lot of people, I think, sometimes make the error of they want to go right to the top and talk to the minister or the premier or prime minister right away and make that kind of the first meeting. As we like to say, it's best to build consensus, build champions outside those offices, and to cast a broad net, talk to a lot of individuals, and really make them champions. Just as you're finding champions on your side, make champions within government. Do that and start maybe lower down the ladder and then escalate your way up. As a gentleman with our group likes to say, of a lot of organizations, they kind of want to go right for the premier, right for the prime minister. Will say, does that draw an analogy to the courts? of that's like going right to the Supreme Court right off the bat. If you get a no from them, there's really no court of appeal or anything like that. So you're much better off to go, I won't say the low and slow analogy, but to talk to others. Don't just start right at the top. Talk to people within government, within the civil service, MLAs, and then gradually build consensus and get internal champions in government on your side as you work your way through your advocacy idea. This, I think goes without saying. Typically, these are more than a meeting or two. I think it's pretty rare to walk into a meeting with someone from government and make your pitch, and then right away it's granted and accepted. As naturally as you're one stakeholder in the government process, there's other stakeholders, other competing pressures and people they need to talk to them before they make a decision. So would encourage people to cast that wide net and to keep at it. It's more than just a meeting, and to really reach out to other MLAs, others in government. And the other bullet, which I haven't mentioned on this slide yet, would just like to highlight again, of on that casting a wide net, be cognizant again that there's other stakeholders out there, there's other asks, demands of government, and that just as you take in your information in different ways now compared to other ways, government, it's the same. They're getting a ton of voices at them. Information travels differently now. It travels so much quicker, where before I think we were all getting our information from the newspaper. And the story on that I've been using is my better half's been watching the Crown on Netflix, and I occasionally glance over, and there's a scene, and it's only from I think the 1980s where it's set, where the Queen and the Prime Minister's communication staff are having a bit of a rift, and both their communication leads are out there at 4 in the morning, wait for the daily newspaper, because that at that time was sort of the sole source of information for everyone.